Hello, and welcome to the Freedom Finances podcast, the first podcast from Freedom Finances. My name is Bradley Valentine. Today is Tuesday, August 6th, and the stock market is closed. So, obviously, we have some news from this week on the stock market. Yesterday was a terrible day. The S&P, the Dow Jones, all down. Many companies, Tesla, Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, all down. Bitcoin dropped $20,000 in the last couple days. And many actually feared that the stock market crash was abound. However, today, after the stock market closing for the day on Tuesday, it looks like the stock market rebounded quite well. S&P is up, the Dow Jones is up, even for those interested in cryptocurrency, Bitcoin is up. So it's looking better, and people are cautiously optimistic. So that's all the news for today, because the stock market, while it's part of our financial well-being, it's really only a small part, and it's really part of our long-term investments into securities and stocks. And many of us have IRAs, 401ks, where money is invested into the stock market. But today what we're going to talk about is financial wellness and how to start that path. Financial well-being is something that's more about investments and cryptocurrency and ETFs, but financial wellness is about building a budget, using our income to our best of our abilities to pay off what we have to do, reducing debt. We're going to talk about all those things today. So the first step we have for many beginners, but also for those who make hundreds of thousands of dollars, is to build a budget. Now, most people should have a budget. Everyone really should have a budget. Pretty much all companies, all businesses have budgets. Heck, even the trillion-dollar United States and every other country out there has a budget. So if you ever think, oh, I don't have time for a budget, or I'm above a budget, just remember there are billion-dollar, trillion-dollar corporations out there that have their own budget. So building a budget, it can be fun, it can be stressful, it can be relieving, but ultimately, once you build a budget, you feel gratified. You feel very financially gratifying that you were able to take time to sit down and build a budget for yourself. Now, we have a starter budget at freedomfinances.org, but I want you to think about some of these things that we're going to talk about next and answer some of these questions for yourself. So first question is, how much is your rent or mortgage? Second is, how much are you spending on your utilities? How much are you spending on car payments? How much are you spending on insurance? Now, I'm not going to go over every single expense, but this is an important one to start with, is what are your essentials? What are your essential spending each month? Stuff that you have to pay for regardless. Now, again, I can't go over every single thing. You can put that into our starter budget at freedomfinances.org, or make your own budget, or do yourself a favor and at the very least write it down on a piece of paper or type it up on a computer if you're not going to use a different budget that's built out for you. But once you start thinking about your essentials, start thinking about what is not essential. Still write this stuff down. Now, sometimes when you start to write down how much you spend on non-essentials, it can feel embarrassing. But remember, this is just for yourself. Don't feel embarrassed for the money that you spend. We'll have time to fix that later, but write it down. If you spend too much money on movies, if you spend too much money on TV, if you spend too much money on clothes, that's okay. Write it down. We're going to get to it later. All right, next step. This is step 2, and this is where we evaluate your spending. You should have written everything down already that you spend each month, whether it's essential or not. But now we evaluate, where can I cut some of this spending? I don't want you to just think about the extra stuff. I want you to think about some of your essentials. I'm not necessarily saying go sell your house, go get a different place to live, but think about some things. Maybe you're thinking about your car. How much are you spending on your car each month? Can you afford that payment? Is it a luxury car when you shouldn't have that luxury car? But I want you to start thinking about some of the essentials: insurance, car, rent, and think, where can you save there? Where can you save on groceries? Anything that you have to have every month, are you spending more than you should? Now, some people don't spend extra on the stuff that they have to have. They spend extra on the stuff that they want to have, and that makes sense. So let's talk about those next, and here are some things to think about. Maybe you find a way to eliminate one or multiple of your TV subscriptions. Yes, one Netflix account may only be $12 a month, but once you add Netflix and Hulu, Amazon Prime, Disney Plus, Paramount, all of a sudden you're spending the same amount as cable, and you may even have cable. What I want you to think about is, can I eliminate one or many of these? Maybe stick with only one of my favorites. Next, ask yourself, how much do you spend on luxury clothes? Not everyone spends a lot here, but if you're one of those people who spends hundreds or thousands of dollars every month, find a way to maybe reduce that to 10 to 25% of what you normally spend on luxury clothes, so that way you can reallocate that money for later. We will talk about how to reallocate a bunch of your funds for later, but for now we're just evaluating what you can do to cut down some of your spending. I want you to think about, how much are you spending eating out every month? Not just on groceries, but how much do you spend on going to McDonald's? We know that McDonald's isn't cheap anymore, right? You can easily spend $25, $30 for McDonald's for two people, where you can get cheaper, healthier food at home from the grocery store. But it's more than McDonald's, because while McDonald's isn't as cheap as it used to be, it's still cheaper than many restaurants. And when you go to a restaurant, you pay a premium for high quality food. You also pay for tip. And that money can add up. So how can you reduce your spending on eating out? My recommendation is, if you're struggling, reduce that 90%. If you can, reduce it as much as possible, all the way 100 down to 100%, and that way you can find a way to eat at home all the time. That's if you're really struggling. If you just want to find some extra cash, maybe drop it to 50%. If you eat out 4 or 5 times a week, find a way to eat out 1, 2, 3 max. Next thing to think about, what's your entertainment budget? How much do you spend on other subscriptions outside of your TV? Maybe music, Spotify, Apple. How much do you spend on movies or concerts or any other music? And where can you reduce that? What can you live without for a while? Now, part of this isn't to say get rid of everything all at once that isn't essential. Just stay at home, only work. I think we hear things like that from Dave Ramsey, and it does apply to someone who is in an extreme struggle, who's trying to save, who's trying to retire. Maybe that is for you, but for most, this will leave you on a purging, and then you'll binge. It's just like if you were to go on a diet, you're way overweight, and all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm not eating any more sugar, no more carbs, no more butter, no ice cream, no snacks. So all you do is you eat vegetables, you eat chicken, you eat organic rice, and that lasts, and maybe you lose 2-3 pounds over 2 weeks, and then you're like, well, I'm just gonna have a Coke, or I'm going to have a pizza. And then in the next 2, 3, 4 weeks, you've realized you've stopped dieting. So the goal isn't to just completely purge because you're just going to binge later, but try to reduce what you can and build a healthy financial habit. All right, so let's think about what we can do next to reallocate some of that money to start producing wealth. Now, we're not going to talk about any sort of like deep investment strategies or stocks or ETFs or anything like that. But what I want you to think about is, where can I put my money? Now, before we move on to that step, I want you to think about your car for a second. Is your car payment eating you alive? If it is, ask yourself why. The answer is probably because the car is more luxury than it needs to be. Now, I'm not saying you can't have a nice car. I'm not saying you can't have a car payment. But many people are paying $600, $700, $800 a month for a car when they could be spending $200-$300 a month on a card that will work well. It may not have as many luxury items attached to it, but I want you to think about that car. I'm not saying ditch your car and find a bus or take Uber. I'm just saying think about your car. Is it eating you alive? And can you get out of that car payment if possible? Before we move on to reallocating or spending, I also want you to think about your emergency preparedness. How much money do you have for an emergency? Do you have a health emergency if something were to happen to you, your spouse, your kids, your family, your loved ones? Are you prepared for that? Another thing to think about is if you lose your job, how long can you live without a paycheck? For many people, that answer is 0 weeks. 1 week, you're done. You have no money. All right, let's move on to the next step. After you've built a budget, after you've started evaluating your payments and your spending and you found ways to reduce some of that extra spending, we're going to work on paying off some debts. Now, this is difficult because you don't see immediate returns in this step until whole accounts are paid off, really. Now, this is by no means a snowball account or snowball effect a la Dave Ramsey or anything like that. Again, I'm not saying that's a bad plan. That is a good plan for many people, but this is really just a plan for people who are trying to get started and build financial wellness. What you want to do is find a way to pay off a whole account. With that being said, you want to look at bad consumer debt such as credit cards and car loans. These are the type of debt that really hurt you. You get little to no value for a credit card payment, right? Continual payments on credit cards. What that means is you're making a premium payment for everything you've purchased in the past. Obviously, some people find themselves in emergencies and have to put groceries on your credit card. I get it. I'm not trying to scold anyone for that. But some people also find themselves in situations where they're at a store they don't have to be at and they can't afford that luxury item yet. Maybe that luxury item is, let's say, a TV for $1,000 and it's the best 8K OLED TV out there. I think that would be more than $1,000, but that's besides the point. And you don't have the money, so all of a sudden you put it on a credit card. That $1,000 you spent on that TV after 12 months is probably closer to $2,000. You've just doubled your payment to get that TV earlier than you would have if you just would have waited. But anyways, paying off these credit card debts is really going to help you in the long run because not only are you saving interest, but you can reallocate that money elsewhere. Right now, you're just reallocating your extra funds towards those bad consumer debts. I'm not necessarily saying you need to pay off your mortgage right now or have a snowball to pay off your smallest one to your next smallest one. I want you to get rid of the bad debt that's hurting you. At this point, you should have a budget. You should have cut some of your spending and reallocated that money to pay off debts. Now, with some of those accounts closed, we can start thinking about investments. That's our next step. When we look at investments, we take the money, the extra money that we have, all the money we've saved in the past, and we reallocate it. Now, I don't want you to necessarily think about the stock market and Bitcoin. If you have some extra cash laying around, you can definitely put some of that money in it. But I want you to think of how can I continue to make this money grow? And it can be something as small as a 401k. Now, some people know this, some people don't know this, but you can save money on your taxes simply by putting money into your 401k. That's because the money you contribute to your 401k is tax deductible for the next year, which means not only have you saved money by taking it away from your budget and extra spending, you've saved money from interest payments from bad debt, but you're putting it towards your retirement for your future that will grow with interest. But it also helps you next year because it reduces your tax bill. And that's the amazing thing about building a quality budget, reallocating money, saving money, is you can make money today that you're spending now on frivolous things or on interest. You can multiply that for next year and the time you retire in 15, 20, 30, however many years it is. That's the amazing thing about a 401k. That's the amazing thing about saving money. Another great option is a health savings account. Now, this isn't necessarily for everyone because it is a high deductible insurance plan, but for those who feel that they fit into that realm, you can save money by putting things into your HSA account, which helps with your taxes again next year. But the cool thing about HSA accounts, you can actually turn that money into more money. That money actually invests itself into the stock market if you figure out how to do that with your employer. So I recommend you ask your manager, ask your employer about an HSA savings account. Again, that's if you can afford a high deductible insurance plan, but it's another great way to save money on taxes and turn your money into more money. Now, final step, this is the step that we do once we've done all those things. We repeat, we add value. Don't backtrack. Okay, let's say you've done this for 6 months, a year, and you found $250 in your budget. It's back in your pocket, whether that's from saving money from a credit card or no longer spending as much money on frivolous things, on subscriptions. You're like, I have $250 extra dollars, and I was living paycheck to paycheck before. Don't just go add that $250 to a new car, okay? Maybe you're like, I spend $300 now on a car payment. I can add $250. Don't do that. At least don't do it yet, right? Spend your money wisely. Put that $250, whether it's into reinvestment or more debt, turn that $250 of your own money into $500 more in the next 6 months to a year. Keep doing that, and then all of a sudden you're going to find yourself saving for retirement, getting yourself out of bad debt, and getting yourself to a point where you're paying less and less and less on taxes. All right. Now, we're going to close it up today for our first episode from Freedom Finances. I hope we were able to teach someone out there at least one thing or two or many. Our goal is to teach financial literacy to all. We're going to talk about things like the stock market, investments, but financial literacy is more than that. It's more about learning about Bitcoin or crypto or ETFs, although that is part of the process, and we do plan on teaching that. You can find more of that information at freedomfinances.org. But before we go, I want to close with a few overall tips and review what we talked about today. Here are some tips to think about. Use your savings to pay off larger debts. Maximize 401k and IRA contributions once you can afford to do so. Avoid using your freed finances to upgrade unnecessarily. Try to wait for that new car until you can truly afford it. Learn more about taxes and how to reduce your tax bill each year. Start your education into the stock market, ETFs, and mutual funds for your future, for your retirement. Be aware of get-rich-quick schemes. We're not going to teach anything like that. We'll never teach you of how to get rich in the next 6 months to a year. If you do, you can stop listening, but we'll never talk about that. Be aware of trendy stock tips, stock market tips, trendy stocks, meme stocks. Most of those are erratic at best, will earn you some money at best, but most people really don't need to worry about trendy stock tips when building financial literacy or building wealth. All right, that's all we have for you today at the Freedom Finances Podcast. I hope we helped you to learn at least one thing today. For more news on financial literacy, on financial well-being, please check out our website at freedomfinances.org.